Hey there, everybody. My name is Kat Bowser. I'm your resident fantasy therapist, and welcome back to my channel. Those of you here for the first time, welcome. My name is Kat Bowser. I'm a licensed therapist. I'm also a writer working on my first novel. And on my channel, I like to talk about what I consider to be the heart of all writing, and that is the characters. And the heart of the characters is in their psychology. So that's the angle I like to take with pretty much everything I talk about on my channel. So today I am continuing my trope diagnosis series, which is where I take a popular writing trope and we dig into the psychology behind it. So last month I did a bunch of requested tropes. This month I actually want to focus on tropes I personally don't like, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad tropes. It just means they're not my thing, but I still think they can be done well. With one exception, and that's the one we're going to talk about today. And that is the abuse is romantic trope. This trope needs to die. It needs to die a fiery death of flames. It's a dangerous trope, and unless you are writing a story where you're showing how this is dangerous, it should never be used, in my opinion. I actually have a couple of tropes that deal with some heavy stuff that I eventually want to do. I'm going to try to just stick to about one a month, though, because sometimes when we talk about this kind of stuff, it gets heavy, it gets sad. There's some not fun stuff that we're talking about here. So I don't want to have this kind of video be all the time because I think you need a break from it. That being said, though, I do think this is an important one because unfortunately I still see this in books. I still see this in movies. And like I said, it's dangerous and it gives a very unhealthy message, especially because I see this a lot in YA, and this is the last thing you need to be telling kids that are that impressionable age. So, obviously, because of the topic we're talking about, there's going to be some heavy stuff in here. If you guys have been in an abusive relationship, if you've been abused in your life, we might be hitting on stuff that's a little close to home in this video. I am trying not to go too depth into detail unless I need to, but just be aware that there may be some stuff in here that make you uncomfortable. So you have been forewarned. Okay, so the abuse is romantic trope. This essentially shows a couple in an abusive relationship, but they paint the abuse as it's because he's overprotective, it's because he cares. It's bullshit, is what it is. It's bullshit. So first off, let's verify here what abuse is. Abuse is anything done to cause harm to another human being within this romantic relationship. Being hit in the face is abuse. Being called a worthless piece of trash is abuse. Preventing someone from having friends is abuse. Preventing someone from having a job or having access to their bank account is abuse. All this is abuse. Having sex with your partner when they do not want to, that is rape and that is abuse. Being in a committed relationship does not mean that you do not have to get consent. You have to get consent every single damn time. If you don't, it's rape, it's sexual assault. So, what I want to really talk about with this one is what this trope usually does, like I said, is it paints their negative behaviors in a positive light. So, I really want to talk about the cycle of abuse in this video because it is a cycle. So, essentially, there are 4 stages. First stage is what we tend to refer to as, you will refer it to, heard under several different names, rising tension, rising action, build up, similar names. This is essentially when the tension in a relationship is building. There are more arguments. There is an overwhelming sense of anxiety. There is essentially a period of walking on eggshells, basically. The abusive partner generally starts to get angrier more easily. The person who is being abused typically starts to notice more criticism, that kind of thing. Stage two is the incident. That's where the whatever the abusive behavior is occurs. And then after that, you have what we refer to as the honeymoon period. And this is really where stories and movies mess this up because they paint it as romantic, and it's not. The honeymoon period is basically after an abusive event has occurred, the partner is going to try to apologize and say they're never going to do it again. I'm sorry, forgive me, don't leave me, take me back. They may try to give the abused partner gifts. They may suddenly be what I would call more relenting than their usual behavior. So if this is someone who normally does not like their partner going out with friends during the honeymoon period, they may say, go ahead, go out with your friends. Honeymoon period doesn't last forever. It unfortunately does not last forever. And then after the honeymoon period, it kind of, I'm going to say it almost merges into what we call the cool down, which is where you don't necessarily have the partner trying to make up for what happened, but the tension hasn't quite come back yet. So this is the period of where the relationship is almost quote unquote normal for the most part. And then it cycles back to the rising tension again. And that cycle continues and continues and continues. But what ends up happening is the honeymoon period starts to shrink. It gets smaller. The rising tension gets larger. It starts to go faster. So if before you had this cycle occurring maybe once every, let's be generous here and say once a month, now it's going to be 3 times a month or 4 times a month, and so on and so forth. In some cases, eventually the honeymoon period disappears entirely. So now the abuse happens, and there's like a period where there's no apologizing, there's no trying to make up for it, but the tension hasn't started to build again. But eventually, even the cool down period eventually goes away. And so you literally have rising tension, abuse, so on and so forth. So what makes this difficult is because what I hear so many times is if the person is being abused, why don't they leave? It's not that simple. Because generally what happens is during the period before the abuse occurs, 2 things usually happen. And honestly, I can't think of a time where I've not seen both of them. The abuser is going to slowly be chipping away at the person's self-esteem, their sense of self-worth. And this is done in multiple different ways. One of the most common is gaslighting, which I will talk about in a minute. And the other is they slowly begin to isolate their victim from the outside world. So it may come up as, hey, I'm making so much money. You don't have to work if you don't want to. Or, hey, we really should cut down on costs. Why don't we just have one car? It really makes me upset that you're spending so much time with your friends or your family. Can you just spend some more time with me? And what this ends up doing is it takes away the victim's supports. So by the time it gets to the point where the victim wants to leave, they most of the time don't have the resources to. So beforehand, if they had left when the cycle had started, then they usually still had friends they could call. They might have still had some money of their own, that kind of thing. But usually by now what's happened is they've been so isolated, they don't have a lot of resources to draw from. So how does it get to that point? Gaslighting is a very, very common method that abusers use. And essentially what gaslighting is it's making someone question their own sense of reality, their own sense of what is really happening. And this is, and I'll admit, when I first learned about this, I actually had to do an extra training on it because it sounds confusing. Because, we hear about making someone question their sense of reality. Well, how does that work? I'll give you an example. So let's say that the couple had an argument. Let's say the abused partner overheard their partner calling another girlfriend or something. So she confronts them about it, and they say, "What? No, I never did that. You're imagining things. It's all in your head." That's gaslighting. It's essentially saying you're not remembering things correctly. What you think happened didn't really happen. And to be fair, almost everybody has done this at least once during an argument, usually without meaning to. It becomes a problem when it becomes pattern. And that's what gaslighting does, is this person does it all the time. So if you hear that and listen to that all the time, eventually you don't even trust your own emotions anymore. So if you're being abused and mistreated, if you've been hearing for all this time, it's not what you think, it's not what you think, then when the abuser says, I do this because I love you, you legitimately wonder, is that really what's going on? Am I overreacting? Am I interpreting this wrong? So you don't even really trust your own emotions anymore. And that is one way that people stay stuck. Oh, let's see. What's the other thing I can say about this? Because I don't want to drag this video on too long, because I want to just address the basics, because like I said, this is a heavy topic and I don't want to depress everybody. One thing that I hear a lot is, why do abusers, why do they abuse their partner? Kind of like with any abuse, it usually boils down to having control over somebody, having control of a situation, having control over someone's emotional response. Most of the time, the abusers, they like that. They like this sense of control. Most of the time, they don't have a lot of empathy. They may have some, but not enough to really do a loving relationship like you deserve. The other is, they were usually abused themselves, and some of them have grown up seeing this behavior, and so they associate it with how you should treat your loved one. One thing I want to bring up with that is, if that is legitimately their viewpoint, I'm treating you like this because this is all I know, those people can change sometimes. But I stress the word sometimes, because usually it's not just, hey, I grew up watching this and that's all I know. Usually it's that plus, okay, I've learned to like control, that kind of thing. So, and the reason that I really think this trope needs to stop is because, like I said, the honeymoon period is what really gets romanticized in this fiction. The behaviors where they prevent the partner from having their own independence get romanticized. So someone wanting their partner to always stay home with them and be loving to them is romanticized, and it shouldn't be, because a partner should allow you to be an independent individual. If you want to go out and hang out with your friends, you should. If you want to go and have your own career, go back to school, you should. But what these books do is they paint it as, well, he wants her home all the time because he loves her so much. No. He wants her home like that because he is a controlling asshole. That's why he wants her home. And I wanted to do this video just so I can get out there. Here is the actual cycle. Here is what's actually going on. Because I don't think writers, I really don't think that people are doing this maliciously. I really don't think that's what's going on. I think they like the idea of someone being able to change a partner, or they like the idea of, oh, he loves her so much he never wants her out of his sight. Because on the surface, when you're very emotionally immature, that sounds romantic to a certain degree. But as you get older, you start to realize, wait, that's actually really messed up. Why isn't she allowed to be her own independent person? And that's why I think this is so dangerous, because it's being presented to kids that are emotionally immature. And they read these books and stories and they see this behavior and they see it presented as loving and caring, and it's not. In fact, it's a warning sign. Half of the things that I've mentioned show up very early on in a relationship. And if someone can catch it early, they can leave before the relationship gets to the point where it's hard for them to leave, before it gets to the point where their self-esteem has been so destroyed that they can't make themselves leave. Because I know that's hard for people to fathom, but it does get to the point where your self-esteem has just been so wrecked and torn down that you literally cannot fathom being able to survive without this person, because you've come to believe all of their lies that they have told you over and over and over and over again. And so you're physically trapped and financially trapped usually, and you're emotionally trapped. And that's why leaving is so damn hard. It's doable, but it's very, very difficult. And I'll throw another statistic at you guys. Most people return to their abusive partner up to 7 times before they finally leave for good, if they leave for good. That is a long time to go back and forth. And what do you think happens every single time they go back? The honeymoon period starts. Thank you for not leaving me. Thank you. I'm gonna prove it. I'm gonna be better. It's gonna be better. You'll see. The pattern starts all over again. And the same thing happens every single time they come back. So that's why a lot of times when people leave, it's best to just completely cut all ties. Don't tell them where you're going. Don't tell them anything. It should be no contact aside from maybe pressing charges to the police. But that's difficult to do. So I don't mind stories that show the dark side of this, that show how horrible it is. But like I said, too many stories don't do that, and that needs to stop. Other thing worth mentioning, I've been using she, he throughout this video just for simplicity's sake. This can occur between same-sex couples. This can occur on couples that are rich, people that are poor. It can occur with non-binary folks. Their abuse, unfortunately, is across the whole spectrum. It's everywhere. So when I say he, she, I'm just saying it for simplicity's sake. So everything I've mentioned here applies to all the different types of relationships. So just something to bear in mind. So I think that's all I want to go into on it today, because like I said, heavy topic, and I think that's the bare basics, and I think that's why, I think I've been pretty clear on why this is a bad trope, and why I consider it to be one of the few tropes that I think just needs to stop. It needs to go away. With most tropes, like I said, even if I don't like them, they can usually be written well and they can work in a certain story. This is one that I do not think can ever be written well. Abuse is romantic is just factually not true, and it needs to stop. So thank you guys for chiming in for my video. Again, like I said, kind of a heavy topic today, but I do think that these are topics that need to be addressed. But I will try to keep it to kind of one of these heavier videos, probably only about once a month. I think they do need to be talked about, but I don't want it to be every video is like, oh, here's a heavy topic again that we have to work through. So I will have more lighter stuff this month as well. Thank you guys. As always, if you have any comments or suggestions, leave them below. If you want to know whenever I upload, make sure you ring the bell so you don't miss any new videos. And until next time, I hope you guys have a good one and stay safe.